It's probably the best move in mixed martial arts. If you get good at this move, you have a significant advantage, and no one's been better at it than Georges St. Pierre. So in this video, we're going to break down what it is he's doing. We're going to break this video down into 3 parts. The first part is going to be setups. We're going to take a look at what exactly Georges St. Pierre is doing to create the opportunity to shoot in for a double or a single. The second part we're going to be looking at is finishes. Once George is in, how does he finish the move to complete the takedown? Third part's going to be backstory, why it's amazing he's so good at this move. Alright, let's take a look at some of the setups that Georges St. Pierre uses to get in nice and deep on those fantastic doubles and singles. First one of the most common ones, the level change setup. Essentially, he's lowering his level down, making his opponent miss a strike. This creates an opportunity where George can shoot in, grab around the legs, and then finish either a double or a single. This is one of the most common, if not the most common ways that Georges St. Pierre does it, and he's oddly good at it. It's amazing some of the shots you see him get under and see how deep he can get when he gets under. Young fighters should really be taking a look at how Georges St. Pierre is so effectively getting underneath his opponent's shots and getting in so deep for doubles and singles. It's worth noting that this will work going underneath straight shots like jabs and crosses, as well as underneath circular shots like hooks. This is something I love about Georges St. Pierre, the drawing level change. He strikes with you just long enough to make you think he's going to stand up with you. And just when you get comfortable long enough to start throwing your hands, that's when he's going to shoot in on you. This is something that I think really works for him because he's known to be such a good striker, and he is such a good striker. So you kind of buy the fact that, well, maybe he is about to strike with me. I think tactics like this are why George gets credit for being one of the first complete mixed martial artists. So I'm putting this low kick catch setup after the drawing level change because the low kick is one of the most common attacks that George is going to draw out of somebody when they think they're about to strike with George. So he's always kind of ready to catch one if he's trying to draw out a level change from you. A lot of times people will really, especially Muay Thai fighters, throw it without even thinking, and George is really good at taking advantage of it. Okay, the jab setup. Georges St. Pierre is known for having one of the best, if not the best, jabs in mixed martial arts. Definitely deserves its own breakdown video, but for now, just know it makes shooting in on the takedown that much easier when everyone's afraid of your jab. Let's take a look at what I mean. Now, when I say jab, just know that I'm including feint jabs in that umbrella term, so watch this. You can see George here throw out the feint jab about halfway to his opponent. This draws out some type of reaction from this opponent. In this case, it's a left hook, but it could be anything defensively or offensively. In that split second while you're distracted by the jab, that's when George is able to shoot in and do what he does best. The incredible thing about this is that George really only needs you to be distracted for like a split second before he goes in and gets that double leg. That's the thing that makes him so remarkable, is he just needs that little bit of time and he can close massive distance extremely quickly. Alright, here's a pretty cool one. This is the pull setup. The way this one works is when George's opponent throws a straight strike, like you're about to see here, as the opponent has to pull that hand back, George goes with the hand pulling back, and that's the opportunity he uses to shoot in. Different from a level change where he goes underneath the strike, with this one he goes back with the strike to get that shot in. Let's discuss one more setup, the Parry setup. This is pretty simple. When George's opponent throws a punch, he's going to slap it with a parry to misdirect it and create the opportunity to move in for his double leg or single leg. A lot of times this works with the pull setup because after someone's had their punch parried, they'll pretty frantically try to pull it back, and in that opportunity, George shoots in. Now, just as important as your ability to shoot in is your ability to finish when you get there. Let's take a look at what techniques George is using in order to finish these shots. So, one of the most simple finishes is the drive forward and scoop. With this one, what you want to do is apply the force straight back as you try to scoop the opponent's knees out from underneath of them. This is a technique that George will often use when he gets in really deep on a shot, or if he catches a low kick. Catching a low kick makes it easy because you already have one leg, and then all you have to do is scoop out the other leg as you drive back. Perhaps the most common way of finishing a shot is to turn the corner, both in MMA and in wrestling. Essentially, what you've got to do is you've got to make a turn at some point. Even a little bit will go a long way. This sideways turn puts your opponent off balance for a split second, and then you will drive. The combination of these two movements make it a very effective way of finishing the double. And when it's done properly, ideally, it should look like this. Just like the drive forward and scoop, when George gets the legs, he turns to the side and then scoops the man's legs out completely underneath him as he takes him over to the left. That's the ideal world, but oftentimes it gets a little more dirty, and you just have to run and drive, eventually putting the opponent down. Next, we're going to be taking a look at the most high percentage way, I believe, to finish a single. This is running the pipe, and George St. Pierre, extremely good at it, like he is with all these other techniques. The thing with running the pipe is you grab one leg, you take a small step back, and then you apply pressure down on the leg. By doing this, you put weight in an area that is not supported, and then you make the opponent's base crumble and take him down to the ground. Huge thing to know, running the pipe and turning a corner feed into each other like peanut butter and jelly. What you do is you shoot, make him defend running the pipe. The actual action of defending it leads him right into a beautiful position for you to get right in on a nice deep double leg and turn the corner. Last one that's really good to know about, getting a high crotch single off of the cage is a emphatic way to take somebody down. George St. Pierre does it to Dan Hardy here. Basically, if you shoot in on somebody and you back them all the way up to the cage, what you're going to do is switch to the single, get your hips underneath of them, lift up very similar to a deadlift, and then take them over the top for just an awesome little takedown here. The thing that makes George St. Pierre's ability to shoot so interesting is that he never wrestled in high school or college. Usually, the fighter who's best at this move is whoever has the best wrestling pedigree. So, NCAA champions, All-Americans, Olympians. George had none of that. And somehow he was able to use this move on wrestlers of that pedigree. So it's almost a mythical thing. I actually asked a high-level wrestler one time who had never heard of George St. Pierre, if I told you a guy never wrestled in high school or college and he was able to take down an NCAA champion, would you say that's possible? And the kid was just emphatically saying, no, that's not possible. Then I showed him George St. Pierre, Josh Koscheck, and it blew his mind. He didn't think it was possible that a guy with a karate background could somehow explosively take down an extremely decorated wrestler without any wrestling background of his own. The big question is really, how did he get that good? How did he train? What were the methods in order to develop shots like he has so much better than everyone else? I know part of it was his willingness to train with anybody and everybody that was better than him. He was training with Jordan Burroughs. When Jordan Burroughs was going to the Olympic team, he trained with the Canadian Olympic team. Part of it is, I think, John Danaher as his longtime coach. Faraz Zahabi, also a longtime coach. Part of it is, I think, George is just special. Another part of it is that MMA, wrestling, the doubles that you use are very different. The range is different. And George attributes his karate training, actually, for being able to get in on those doubles. But I'd be very interested to sit down and have a conversation with George to see how exactly he got so good at this shot when he had such a... I mean, he probably didn't start shooting till probably in his late teens, and somehow he's significantly better at it than people that have been doing it their whole lives at the highest level. So if I could sit down and have a conversation with George about what like the program structure looks like in order to become that good at shooting, oh, I would love to do that. But we are going to take a look at the technical approaches he uses, the tactics and the setups and the finishes. But just know he's not doing anything secret here. He's just extremely good at doing some really basic things. And to get good at it yourself, you're going to have to train this over and over and over again until you can make it look as easy as George St. Pierre does. We're looking at quite the unique punch. This is the Superman jab with George St. Pierre. Now, I would definitely say, it's fair to say, George is pretty well known for this move, and I haven't seen anyone do it nearly as well since him, so let's do a breakdown on it. A Superman punch is a pretty unique punch in that you lift one leg up off the ground. As you can see here, George lifted up his knee. He's now going to kick that leg straight back as he throws a punch at the opponent, like so. He uses the power of kicking that leg back to propel him forward faster and adds that speed to his punch. Whenever I taught this move to my students, I would tell them to imagine kick off of an imaginary wall. You can actually kick off of a wall too if you chose to do that. Now, the way George throws the Superman punch is pretty unique. Typically, when someone throws a Superman punch, they use their rear hand and kick with their rear leg, like so. Using the rear hand makes it a Superman cross. What makes George unique is that he punches with the lead hand and kicks with the lead leg, like you're about to see here. When the technique is performed with the lead arm and the lead leg, this is what we call a Superman jab, and this is the type that George St. Pierre specializes in. Now, the Superman jab is particularly hard to deal with for a couple reasons. One is it closes a massive amount of distance very fast. It does this for a couple reasons. One is it uses the lead hand, which is already kind of close, and then it harnesses the power of that back leg to propel that lead hand very rapidly forward. Because it uses that lead arm and it harnesses the power of that leg to propel it forward, it probably is the punch out of any punch that covers the most distance. Two is because it's really easy to get out clean. I've never actually seen George St. Pierre get punished for throwing a Superman punch. He's able to somehow close a lot of distance and then maintain that distance just in case it fails. So watch, maintains the distance and gets out. He's never actually been punished for missing a Superman punch. Now, like any good martial artist, George St. Pierre has a bunch of setups for this move. Let's take a look at some of them. His most common one is going to be the low kick setup. So here's how this works. George starts by throwing a lead low kick. I want you to watch how Nick reacts to this kick, right? He checks it by bending his knee slightly and turning it out. It's a form of a check that you don't need to lift the leg up for. Now check this out, right? George lifts up his leg for the Superman punch. The thing is that the lifting of the leg actually looks like a kick. So much so, in fact, that if you watch, as George lifts up his leg, Diaz is going to bend his knee to do the check that I talked to you about from earlier. The thing is, though, is he's been deceived, and as he's thinking about checking kicks, here comes the Superman punch. Up the Superman punch with the lead leg kick is great because it's very safe. You got that long lead leg setting up that long punch, and you can do a lot of damage from a distance. It doesn't have to be a lead leg kick though. It could be a rear kick. Watch. Here George lands a rear low kick, And because BJ's thinking kick, when George lifts up his leg, you can see BJ goes to check, but he gets nailed by a Superman punch. Now you can take this concept up high too. He sets up the Superman punch with the high kick. So watch this. Throws up the high kick, and watch how Koscheck defends it here. Watch the hand. He reaches over to his left like so to block the kick. Pay attention to that hand again as George lifts up his left leg there in order to go for the Superman punch. Watch how Koscheck reached over in order to block the kick again. This gave George St. Pierre the big opening he needed to go for that Superman jab. Here's something really interesting. He'll use both of the kicks from the last two techniques. Watch. He goes low, then he goes high. Now he's really got Koscheck thinking about kicks, and that's the time we go for the Superman jab. Now, the important thing to note is while he's not landing this combination necessarily that you're seeing here, he's doing so from so far of a range and getting out safely that it doesn't really matter. That's the beauty of combining these three techniques in particular. They're all so long that you can stay safe as you're doing it and still do a significant amount of damage. Now, George St. Pierre is known for his jab, and it makes setting up a Superman punch that much easier. When someone gets popped by a jab a lot and they're really looking out for it, and they start to develop a sense of the timing, it makes it easier to actually land a Superman punch. This is because it's similar to a jab. It's with the lead hand, but it's also very different. It covers much different distance, and it has much different timing. So just when you get used to the jab, the Superman jab could be lurking around the corner with completely different timing and completely different distance. Final setup we'll talk about. Because it's so long and so fast, it's a tremendous counterattack. So watch, Jake Shields moves in, but gets countered by the Superman punch. Watch this. Jake initiates the movement by moving that back leg up, but then gets reamed by this counter Superman jab. Alright, we're going to close this out by talking about the low kick follow-up. Here's how this works. George St. Pierre throws the Superman. Watch Koscheck's left leg. He stepped to the left. He's actually stepping right into George's rear low kick when he does that. It's beautiful. It's also a great counter for when someone's moving backwards too. So George throws a Superman as he backs away. It's just a great follow-up to a great technique. Haven't really seen someone do this follow-up or the Superman jab since George. George, we miss you a lot. Fantastic times watching you.